We did tell her that we were going to bring in other investors into the deal, but we didn't word it in a way that they know that we weren't going to close on the deal. We talked about money partners or other investors, but when she found out that we weren't going to be the ones closing on the deal, she felt uncomfortable with that and asking a lot of questions and why isn't it you guys? But I think having that transparency right from the get-go, saying, you know, we're not necessarily gonna sign, but close it on another name, that would have saved us from a lot of headaches.
Let's talk about the 5 biggest mistakes the 2 new wholesalers made on their very first wholesale deal. In today's video, Sarah and Lenard are gonna sit down with us and break down exactly the mistakes they made on their first wholesale deal. But don't worry, it all turns out well. They still made $15,000 on that deal, but they actually learned a lot of lessons as well. So let's jump into the 5 lessons that they took away from their first wholesale deal. What is up, YouTube? Matt McKeever here, and I'm really excited for today's video because I've got a couple of new wholesalers that are going to share their biggest lessons and mistakes when it came to wholesaling their first deal. I've got Sarah and Lenard. Hey guys, how's it going?
Hey,
good, yourself?
Awesome. Appreciate you guys being here and really appreciate you guys agreeing to share your experience on your first wholesale deal. So before we get into the lessons learned and what you would do differently next time, let's first talk about this deal. So what did it look like?
Well, this deal was in Ottawa, so we reside in Ottawa, and it was through a Kijiji ad. So after I learned about the wholesale strategy, I was like, that's super cool. You can have like your return on time is so much faster. So we decided to dive into it right away, and I posted a Kijiji ad on diligently, like every day. So I would just refresh it on a daily basis, and some people would call just kind of find out and for me to give them a price. But this lady would call me pretty much every week saying that she was interested in selling her house. However, she wasn't really ready. So I just kept on having a conversation with her every single time that she called until the day that she was ready and invited us into her home and to visit it. And then that's when we made the offer.
Awesome. I love it. So I'm just going to kind of interrupt here right off the bat because first things first, there's so many people that say they want to get into wholesaling, but then say they don't have the time or the money to do so. This came from posting one Kijiji ad just consistently every single day. Theory, you maybe spend half an hour writing it the first time and then a couple of seconds every day reposting.
That's right. That's exactly it.
And then otherwise just answering the phone when people call.
Yeah.
That's it.
So I have nothing to do. I'm actually sometimes nervous to call people, so it's actually a lot easier to just pick up when they call. So.
And so is that just like a I buy houses, any condition sort of ad, or?
Very, very basic. We buy houses, no conditions, blah, blah. Just call me and we figure out an offer.
Awesome. Love it. Yeah. And then so specifically about this deal, what did it look like?
So it was a duplex, and this woman had the property for quite some time. It was kind of like one of those properties that was like a little bit neglected, kind of cluttered, a lot of junk in there. And we were able to offer her a decent price, and then we got a nice wholesale fee of $15,000.
That's awesome. And so this was your very first time doing a wholesale.
Very first time,
Absolutely.
yeah.
So it can be a bit of a roller coaster.
Absolutely,
right?
yeah.
Peaks and valleys. So I'd love for you guys to take the time then to share your 5 biggest lessons from it, because once I saw the 5 lessons you laid out, every one of my wholesalers has to go through learning them. Some of them still need to learn them.
Yes, although the deal kind of, we got the deal, but there are so many instances that it could have fell through, right?
Exactly.
So the first mistake that we made was to not advertise the deal to everyone at once. So what I had done is build a buyer's list, and from different tips that I received from either your YouTube channel or talking to Ben Morrison, and when I built my buyer's list, I knew exactly who would be interested in a deal of such, right? So I called that person and I gave him, a couple of days to think about it, and then when that didn't work out, I just moved on to the next person who I thought would be interested in a deal, and that was just a big waste of time. I should have just advertised it, like mass email everyone and put it on a wholesale group, which is what I did in the end. But that was very stressful to do it closer to the deadline, because then you only have 3-4 days to assign this deal. And yeah, so we lost a lot of time, and I think one of the reasons why I sort of decided to do it like that was a little bit of a lack of confidence in the deal itself and in ourselves too, right? Just like Leonard mentioned, the house was very cluttered. So when we took pictures, we're like, how much are the renos really? So we tried to estimate the cost, but we were like, what if we're super wrong and it's, so much more. So I think that's why we didn't make it super public at first, but in the end, we're like, we're going to make it public. If somebody wants it, come and get it. And so.
Yeah, it's a mistake I see a lot of my newer wholesalers make as well. And before I get into the reason I think my wholesalers make the mistake, how long was your condition period?
2 weeks.
Yeah, it was 2 weeks.
Like, you give exclusive rights to this one buyer for 2 days. It usually like stretches into 3 days where they're like, I just need one more day, let me think, and I'll know for sure. Then you do it with the next person, stretches another 2 or 3 days, and all of a sudden we're like halfway through our condition period, right? Which that's when all of a sudden the stress starts rising. And so I don't know if this was true with Sarah and Leonard, but I know with my team of wholesalers, the real issue is that when you get that contract, when you get the deal under contract, you feel like, I did it, right? Like I'm done. Finally a win, I was able to pull it off. But the problem is you're only really halfway there. And what I see oftentimes with new wholesalers as well, if they do post publicly into that group or they post the deal on their stories, they post it once. And then they're like, well, everyone's seen it. I did my job, done deal. But the problem is, humans, we've got a lot of different things competing for our attention. And so an aspect of that is, they say in marketing, right, it takes 7 impressions for someone to want to buy from you. I think the same is true with wholesaling, right? So that final buyer that came to you guys, that was through the Wholesale Facebook group, or do you know where you found them?
Actually, that happened kind of organically. So I ended up talking to one of my cousins, and he was mentioning a story about him and his mom going through their recent purchase of a home, and then he mentioned his realtor. So I ended up contacting his realtor because at that point I was just in the process of just talking to everyone, just networking, talking to anyone, either whether they were a mortgage broker, whether they were a realtor, whether they were a private lender, whatever the case may be. So in this case, I ended up reaching out to this person. We had a couple conversations, and I told him about our wholesale deal, and he said that he actually might be interested. And then that's the person that we eventually wholesale the deal to.
That's awesome, guys. So, the biggest mistake here was just not hitting the email list and trying to tell everyone at once.
Exactly.
What would you do next time? Like, what would that look like? Do you have a system or process in place now where you're like, okay, next time we get a deal under contract, we're doing this, this, and this?
Yes. So from that first deal, our buyers list have actually grown.
Yeah.
So first, as soon as we get a deal, just mass email everyone and then call the ones that we think would be most interested. But so that at least it's out there if somebody else sort of surprises us and says, hey, I want this deal, or I know somebody who does want the deal. We're not sort of like waiting for that one person to respond. So that would be the first thing that we would do. Definitely send it to all the buyers, the whole buyers list at first, and post it on a wholesale group, and then repost it, and then start calling people. That's sort of what we're thinking for the next one.
I love that process because, again, a big mistake I see my wholesale team make is sometimes they're like, I'm 99% sure this buyer's going to buy it. And so they're like, I don't want to waste the time writing that email. There's really 2 issues there. One, we're making the same mistake you guys made the first time where like you're just wasting time. But the second one is, like you mentioned, Sarah, you're also not going to grow your buyers list if you're never sending out deals to them. Because I find that oftentimes, especially with inexperienced or newer wholesale deal buyers, they're often going to need a couple false starts before they actually end up like following through and closing on the deal. So they need to like kick the tires a few times first, right? Where they're like, maybe I am interested. But if you're only calling one-on-one your buyers list, you're never going to call that new buyer, right? Because you're going to hit the regular suspects first.
Right, that's exactly it.
Awesome. And so let's dive into mistake number 2.
Mistake number 2 was not to be firm on the deposit amount. So we had set our deposit to half of the amount that we wanted, half of that $15,000. And when somebody came in and said, oh, I really want this deal, but I only have, let's say, $3,000 in the bank right now. And we're like, well, we have no one else, so sure, yes, no problem. And then I think the problem is that it really when you're not firm on your deposit, it doesn't wean out the people who are not serious because the deposit is non-refundable. So you could technically have the deposit, but kind of say, well, I don't have it, just so that you don't put a lot of money down, right? And then you can back away and then feel comfortable losing 2 to 3K, right? As opposed to, 7.5. So that was a big deal for us not to be firm on the deposit, because I think we could have weaned out a lot of people who weren't serious about the deal.
Yeah, 100%. And again, like I know multiple times I've been so happy that we were firm on our deposit requirements, because like it's 2 or 3 days before closing, we'll have a buyer reach out that like maybe we were already a bit iffy on, and they're like, I don't think I'm gonna be able to close. And we're like, okay, just so you know, like you're losing that deposit, like this is on you. And all of a sudden they're like, no, like it's a good deal, you'll find someone else. And it's like, well, I'm keeping your 10K either way. Exactly. We find that often is the difference between them DKing us, like, oh, I don't know, or I don't want it, versus them following through on the deal. And just having that sense of accountability is so important. And I find that when people put their money where their mouth is, they'll actually close on the deal.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's exactly what happened. When we said that the deposit was non-refundable, you're like, okay, we signed the contract, but da-da-da-da-da. And we're like, well, until the deposit is down, then I can't advertise it to anybody else, right?
Hey YouTube, are you guys looking to buy a rental property? If the answer is yes, then you need to pay close attention to the following information. Nitty Gritty Real Estate is a company that's here to help you buy a rental property in your market in as little as 30 days. Investors typically learn real estate by watching YouTube videos, joining Facebook groups, all kinds of different things, reading books. However, I see tons of people spend a lot of time and money and yet never end up taking action because they still don't know how to actually get started. Does this sound familiar? The best way to learn something is by actually doing it. And so Nitty Gritty's experienced team will actually walk you through the entire process of how to buy a property, rehab it, get it up and operational, and they'll even provide you with contacts if you need to set up the real estate business. So if you need lawyers, accountants, things like that. But go to nittygrittyrealestate.com for additional information, and you can click the link in the video description down below to hop over. But again, they're really just here to help facilitate and get you launched into your real estate investing career, and they'll give you a free consultation with no obligation whatsoever. So again, link to everything that we talked about is in the video description down below. Jump over and talk to Nitty Gritty Real Estate, and why not get started today?
Exactly.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's exactly what happened. When we said that the deposit was non-refundable, you're like, okay, we signed the contract, but da-da-da-da-da. And we're like, well, until the deposit is down, then I can't advertise it to anybody else, right?
Awesome. Let's dive into mistake number 3.
So mistake number 3 was the fact that we didn't take enough pictures. And by we, I mean me. Usually when we go through these viewings, I'm the one that make sure my phone is charged. I go take all the pictures. As mentioned before, this particular property had a lot of clutter, a lot of just junk. So it was just hard to maneuver through the house. It's only after the fact that I realized that, oh, you know what, like maybe this picture's a little blurry, this picture's like not so good. So I should have checked those pictures when I was actually on site, so I can actually retake those pictures. And also, if a picture says 1,000 words, then a video says 1,000,000. So that's one thing that at least when we were contacting these potential buyers, they were asking us if we had any videos, and we're like, no, we don't, unfortunately. So it's like. So next time we'll definitely, at least from that point forward, I make sure to always do a video as we're walking through the property. And then it also provides the potential buyers a nice layout of how the property looks like. And also it kind of gives them a better gauge on how to estimate the renovations.
Yeah, absolutely. The videos are extremely powerful. And with my newer wholesalers on my team, I usually find it's 1 of 2 reasons that they don't take photos or videos or don't take enough. It's either a lack of confidence, so they're afraid they're going to spook the deal, right? Like if I ask to take a photo or a video, what if they say no? And then what if they just kick me out of the house? And what if, and they start worrying about this crazy what if scenario, right? And the other reason I find it often happens is they're just too excited. And they're like, I think this is a deal. I think I'm gonna get my first wholesale deal. Oh my God, it's a wholesale deal. And then all of a sudden they've gone through the house and I'm like, there's no photos of the main floor. And they're like, oh yeah, but it does have a main floor, you know, and you're like, well, it would be cool to see it.
Absolutely. Like in our case, like the property owner was a little, like you can tell they were a little embarrassed about the condition about their property. So then, at least for me being a first timer, like it gave me less confidence to ask proposal question as far as, do you mind if I take a video as much as all these pictures too? Yeah.
And she actually said no at one point.
Yeah.
And we're like, well, you know, we have investors that are going to come in the deal and they do need to see the house. And so that's sort of how we convinced her. But I think it can definitely spook you when somebody says, well, no, because there's so much clutter and they're embarrassed. So I think that was also one of the reasons for that particular reason. We didn't have a lot of pictures or a video. And at the end, she actually asked to see all the pictures that we took.
Oh, interesting. I don't know if I've ever actually had a seller ask that.
Just to make sure, right? So.
Awesome. And the next mistake?
So the next mistake was the fact that we only were able to get one walkthrough. One thing that we've learned with the Cashflow Tribe is that you want to try and get at least 3 walkthroughs during your conditional period. And in this case, once again, because the person was a little embarrassed, they didn't want that many people going through their property, so they only allowed us to have 1 walkthrough. One thing that we didn't realize is that we had some leverage, because since they were so firm on that particular term, we could have been maybe negotiated on lowering the price and all that stuff. So so that's definitely one thing for next time. Like at least for now, moving forward, we always try to get at least 3 walkthroughs.
Yeah, I think that's a huge point. And oftentimes, again, if you haven't done a lot of negotiations, it's easy to fall victim to a mentality of like, well, this is binary. Either I get the 1 walkthrough or I don't, and that's that. Where it's like, oh no, like there's other levers we can pull. Like, oh hey, I really need 3 walkthroughs, but if you can only give me 1, we're gonna have to come down $5,000. And all of a sudden, you may find that they're like, oh, well, if it's going to cost me $2,500 per walkthrough, I'll give you 2 more, right?
Right. Yeah. That's exactly it. Yeah, the walkthroughs are super important. And I think actually one of our buyers, he said, I would buy it sight unseen, but it would have to be at that price, right? So if we had negotiated the price down, that would have given us more leverage and say, hey, yes, you can buy it sight unseen because it's that price. And we were able to kind of negotiate that. So, yeah.
Awesome. And then the final mistake?
The final mistake was not being transparent enough with the seller as to the fact that we were going to assign the deal. We did tell her that we were going to bring in other investors into the deal, but we didn't word it in a way that they know that we weren't going to close on the deal. We talked about money partners or other investors, but when she found out that we weren't going to be the ones closing on the deal, she felt uncomfortable with that and asking a lot of questions and why isn't it you guys? And she also thought that, well, how are you able to sort of sell my house without having bought my house, right? And we explained to her that, well, we have it under contract, and the buyer was okay with the terms and the price, and it actually ended up being okay because the seller met the buyer and he was very likable. They sat down, had dessert together, they talked, and then she was okay with kind of passing along the deal with them. But she felt that we were making too much money off her house, and luckily the buyer was able to explain that, you know, we're gonna close on the terms and the price that we agreed on. Whatever we and, you know, the buyer we agree on, that's just between us. In the end, they were okay with it because they really wanted to sell their house. But I think having that transparency right from the get-go, saying, you know, we're not necessarily gonna assign, but close it on another name, that would have saved us from a lot of headaches.
Yeah, I think it's really important. A lot of investors make a mistake when they think about wholesaling. They assume that we need to be secretive, right? Or that there's some sort of trickery involved. And at the end of the day, with a lot of the wholesale deals we do, they're often unusual transactions for unusual properties or situations. And so there's a lot of opportunities where a deal can fall apart. And if you're not building a relationship with the seller, then when that random friction comes into the equation, there's a good chance they'll just back out. Where if you've been building a relationship from day one, they'll actually sit down, listen to your side, and try and empathize and understand your perspective. And so, like, it's obvious that you guys must have had a relatively strong relationship with the seller, that, you know, they were willing to sit down with the new buyer, have that conversation, gain that perspective. So
yeah, and we did, because Sarah put in a lot of hours talking to this person. I'm sure like close to maybe 6 hours or so, and
Probably more.
Probably more than that. Yeah, it's a chance for new investors to educate the seller on the processes of certain transactions as well.
Awesome, guys. Well, I really appreciate you sharing with the audience your 5 biggest takeaways from your first wholesale deal, because I know for most Canadian investors in particular, it feels like a black box, right? Where it's just this box of mystery and you have no idea how it actually happens. You're like, I know people do it, but I'm not really sure, and like, what could go wrong? I think oftentimes if we're going in with the right intentions and we're managing expectations, it'll work out, right? And the key is just that commitment to, this is going to happen, right? Like, constantly talking to people, even when your first few buyers say no or end up deciding to pass on the deal, rather than just shrugging and moving on. You guys were like, okay, now it's time to go into overdrive mode. We have to hit everyone we know, just constantly talk about it. But not only is that good for that deal, it's also good for all the next deals, as you mentioned, with your buyers list growing.
Absolutely, and I have some of my buyers constantly emailing me and asking me whether I have another deal on the go.
Where's
So
the next one?
yes,
Yeah.
so I'm eager to get the next one going so that we can hopefully assign it a little bit easier.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I'm really excited for you guys in your future with wholesaling. If people want to get on your buyers list, can they, and what's the best way to do so?
Yes, they can. They can reach me at on Instagram. It's Sarah Sémajuste, and Lenard is
20.more on Instagram.
Awesome. And we'll throw a link in the video description down below so that you guys can jump over and follow along both with their real estate journey, as well, if you're looking to maybe get a deal in Ottawa, you can join their buyers list.
Absolutely. Contact us.
Please do.
Thanks again to Sarah and Lenard for taking the time to shoot this video. If you guys got value from this video, I need you to smash that like button. Hit the subscribe button if you're new to my channel. And let me know, what questions do you have in regards to wholesaling? Have you done a wholesale deal? What were your biggest mistakes when it comes to wholesaling? Jump in that comment section down below. Share it with your fellow viewers, because, I mean, there's so many people that get so scared about doing that first wholesale deal. And most people just need to know it's possible. Most people just need to know that it can be done and that other people like them have done it as well. So I really appreciate Sarah and Lenard taking the time to just share their experiences. If you guys would like to see other great Canadian real estate content, check out this playlist right here. Or if you'd like to see more about wholesaling real estate, check out this playlist right there. Thanks, guys.